Hey, this is how I made Enigma.
So I started out with the first chord.
And in order to create this ethereal type of sound, you can see that I stayed with a lot of the same notes and just changed the root notes, or just changed 1 or 2 notes per chord.
Like these two chords are the exact same, just with a different root note. This one, different root note, added 1 note.
So keeping those same notes and staying consistent with them gives it this sort of like meditation music, very ethereal, very spacey, very otherworldly type of feel. But keeping those bass notes switching gives it some sort of emotion and a little more feel and a little more like a song, so you can have a bass line to follow along with that actually provides a roller coaster. It's almost like making a very relaxing roller coaster. That no was just a very spontaneous sort of decision, like I was fucking around and it sounded good to me. A lot of music happens to be like that, like just fucking around, making noise with whatever you have, whatever instruments you have, whether it's your voice, piano, this or that. And if it sounds good, throw it in there. I added this sort of spacey transition effect that transitions into a bass right here. And the reason I did that is because the first chords go for about 21 seconds before the drums even come in. And as a musician, I know that people's attention span isn't that long. And while this is very beautiful and ethereal, I felt like it needed something to sort of grab the attention. And so 10 seconds in, that bass comes in and you start to get a feel that it's going somewhere. It's not just like this meditation track. And the drums come in a little early. This is something I personally love to do, is having the drums come in a little bit before the next measure, just to sort of prepare the person for that next drop. It sort of makes the transition smoother and it catches you off guard because it's at the very end of a measure. You're like, oh, now I know what's coming in. Up, it all happens within like a second. Now, originally the drums were just kick and snare and it sounded like this. I wanted to go with a sort of bouncy drum pattern to sort of fill in that space that is left with those big, open, ethereal chords. And to add some variety, because it started to sound boring after a few minutes to me, I switched out those second and third kicks with a tom. I didn't add anything, I didn't change anything, I just changed the sound of a couple of the sounds that are already there, and it gave it a lot more variety, it made it a lot more interesting, and gave it more bounce. Then I added the hats. Which, if you watched my social media video of this first, you would know that the hat pattern was a little more complex. There were actually some more hats at the end of each phrase. I took them out because I find that simplifying the drums actually gives them more bounce. And I've talked about it before, but it's sort of like letting the listener fill in the music themselves. It adds like this space that's in the music and your mind sort of wants to fill it in. So when the person can fill in that bounce, or just hear that space, really, because that's what it is hearing the space. That's filling in the bounce, because part of the bounce is the space. It almost makes the track sound fuller, like the track is trying less hard, but doing more. I switched to a piano sound on this drop, going from these big chords, because I want the focus of this point to be the drums, because it's this bouncy drum pattern. I want that to be the focal point, but I don't want to completely get rid of the melodics. So having that spacey piano really leaves a big pocket for the drums to sit in. It's not as full and epic as those chords in the It's not as full and epic as those chords in the intro, but it's enough to carry the melody and leave a lot of room for the drums. And I added these simple little counter melodies on another piano with more reverb just to fill in those empty spaces. Now when the chorus comes in, I added this really low hat in the background. Really just to add some texture and a little more excitement to the chorus. Nothing crazy, you can barely hear it in the final mix actually. I layered a new pad with it, which I really like because it has this underwatery sort of sound. It's just very beautiful to me. Throw in the piano. Honestly, I don't even think it needed it, but just as a nice little touch, I added this hit. And it has a ping pong delay on it, which means it hits and then the delay goes left, right. So if you're listening on headphones or speakers, it goes poof, poof, poof. And I added this automation on it so it kind of swells out and then swells back in. So it goes two, 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 two. Like I said, it was just kind of like another little touch to add, a little ear candy sort of thing. And I feel like it sort of adds this sort of movement to it, like this back and forth, and it's swelling, and it almost becomes a focal point without even meaning to become a focal point. And I added this section with a bass line. I wanted to just switch it up in some way. And a thing that I tend to go back to a lot is a drum and bass only section. I love bounce. Like that's my thing. Is drums and bass, a bouncy bass line with a bouncy drum. So I wanted to replicate that with going with a sort of plucky bass and just following the root notes. Just to add some dynamic. I didn't want it to be the same chords and the same drums for 2.5 minutes or whatever. And when I do these little fills at the end, I'm thinking about what note is gonna hit right here. The next bass note that hits on this one when the chords come back in, I want this to be as seamless as possible to this. But I cut out the bass, so it's like you're expecting it, but then you hear the fucking chords come in, and I don't know what the psychology is behind that, but expecting that bass note to hit right there, and then instead you're met with like this whoa, but it still has that bass note in there. It's like you're grabbing onto it, you're grabbing onto something, and you end up not getting what you're grabbing for, but you get way more. And then for this final chorus, I just doubled it up. If you listen to a lot of good music, you'll notice that they double up the last chorus. That's kind of like a classic way to drive the main message home and just get to the end of the song, I guess. I like to do it. One thing I will say is if you're adding a second chorus, if you're doubling up the chorus, try and add something in that next chorus that differs it from the rest, so it's not just the exact same thing. And this can be done in the vocals, but for the instrumental, I wanted to do something sort of catchy, something very like soft and catchy. So I just went back and forth, one note to the other. That's a great way to do something catchy. Find two notes that sound good together and then just repeat them. You play it pretty safe there and get a catchy little melody. Then I added some flares in between because I didn't want it to just be, I love that part. Oh my. And this part was just something I heard, like just kind of freestyled it. Now for me, a lot of the beauty in this song is in those chords, especially that underwater chord sound. So I let that ride out at the end because I like to do beautiful outros. I like to really leave the person with the beauty of it. So and I added the birds just as a nice little touch, like just because birds are beautiful, you know? Just add to the beauty. And this final little lead in the outro was kind of just like a last minute decision, along with the birds. Just, I guess, just something to spice it up. It really wasn't needed, but I wanted to do something there. Just to, like a little like cherry on top, you know? One thing I will say is that that lead in the outro ends on this note. So you can see the chord has this D sharp in it, and I ended on that D sharp. Because there's something very powerful about that. It just, I don't know, it's like the note's already in the chord, and then it just brings out that note in the chord. Just kind of brings it home. And then of course I tailed the birds out, you know, a couple seconds after, because that just does something magical for me. Like hearing these last little bird tweets as all the harmonics reverb out, it's just like, it just adds to the whole vibe, you know? So that was how I made Enigma. I hope that was a pretty good breakdown. I hope you got something from it. If you like this kind of stuff, then subscribe, especially follow my socials because it's like more short form and to the point. If you like the in-depth stuff, you know, just still subscribe, just join my little ecosystem and everything I'm doing, because I create, mainly make music, but I create and I talk about my mindset in it, you know? I fucking watch my mindset and I'm like, oh shit, I had to overcome this doubt while I was making this. Like, let me talk about this and how I overcame this, little tricks and shit that makes like producing very simple, straightforward, and easy. Like, it doesn't have to be hard, and that's what I talk about. Get out of here, man. I got this plant over here. I love this plant. I love this plant so much, but it's bringing all these gnats. Listen, I love plants, I love music, I create, and I talk about creative mindset. I give tips. I'm here to share all of my, I don't fucking have secrets. I don't have secrets. And if I do, I won't for long, because I'm here to give them away, you know? So if you like that, if you want to create, if you like my vibe, if you like fucking mentality stuff, mindful stuff, music stuff, subscribe. I'm just rambling, and yeah, man.